After the sudden death of her father-in-law, Sarah came to the reading of the will, where her ex-husband and his mistress with their baby were waiting for her. But as soon as the notary read the final words of her father-in-law, "Hello. Before we begin, please write in the comments which country you're watching us from, whether you've subscribed to the channel, and if you've given it a thumbs up. We wish you enjoyable listening." The news of Henry James Patterson's death arrived at the end of September, when Sarah was finishing canning tomatoes. Outside the window, a light rain was drizzling, washing the yellowing leaves of the old maples in the yard. In the small kitchen of her one-bedroom apartment, it was warm and smelled of spices. Sarah was just screwing on the last jar of pickled tomatoes when the phone rang so unexpectedly that she jumped and dropped the pot holder into the jar of brine. She fumbled for the phone with damp hands. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. "Sarah Elizabeth?" The official male voice sounded dry and detached, as officials or authorities usually do when delivering bad news. "This is Notary Andrew Victor Peters calling. I need to inform you of sad news. Yesterday, Henry James Patterson passed away." The jar of brine slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Shards scattered across the kitchen, and the smell of dill and garlic filled the room, mixing with the scent of the sudden grief that overwhelmed her. "How? Passed away?" was all Sarah could manage to squeeze out, leaning on the edge of the table to keep from falling. "We saw each other last week. He looked completely healthy. He was talking about new seedlings he planned to plant at the cabin in the spring." "Heart attack," the notary replied briefly, and notes of human sympathy crept into his voice. "It happened at night. Unfortunately, they couldn't save him. The paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late." Sarah sank onto the old stool, upholstered in cracked vinyl, not noticing that she stepped on a sharp shard. Before her eyes stood the face of Henry James Patterson, with deep wrinkles around his eyes that became especially noticeable when he smiled, with a neatly trimmed grey beard, with an attentive, wise gaze. Her father-in-law, who had remained closer to her than her own father after the divorce from Michael. The man who didn't turn away from her when his son betrayed her. "Allow me to express my condolences," the notary continued. "I'm calling to invite you to the reading of the will. Henry James Patterson left specific instructions that you be present. It will take place on Wednesday at 11 in the morning at my office on Main Street, 42, second floor, office 205. Sarah mechanically wrote down the address on a scrap of paper, not even realizing what she was doing. Her mind was foggy, and it seemed she could hear Henry James Patterson's voice. "Don't get upset, Sarah dear. We all leave someday. What's important is what we leave behind." "But we with Michael." She faltered, not knowing how to explain that formally she was no longer part of the Patterson family, though she still bore their last name. They hadn't officially divorced, but had been living apart for 2 years. "Henry James Patterson specifically insisted on your presence," Peters replied firmly, as if knowing her doubts. "He left a personal letter that will be read after the official part. And yes, I'm aware of your family circumstances." Henry James Patterson explained everything. After hanging up, Sarah didn't get up from the stool right away. The sharp pain in her foot finally made itself known. The shard had embedded deeply in her skin. She mechanically pulled it out, pressed a napkin to the wound, but the physical pain was incomparable to what was happening in her soul. Memories of their last meeting surfaced. Henry James Patterson had called himself and asked her to visit. His voice sounded as usual, energetic, with a slight rasp, but there was something subtly alarming in his tone. She came not empty-handed, baked an apple pie, his favorite, with cinnamon. In his apartment, where bookshelves covered all the walls and an antique clock steadily ticked away the time, they drank tea from thin porcelain cups that his wife, Sarah's mother-in-law, had bought long before they met. She had died long before Sarah knew her. "You know, Sarah dear," her father-in-law said then, looking at her over his old-fashioned glasses in a thin metal frame, "you're the only one who remembers what tea I like. Even Michael never remembered. He didn't care what to drink as long as it was strong, but you always treat others' habits with care. That's your strength, attention to the little things that others don't notice." She blushed then, brushed it off, saying it was nothing, just good Earl Grey tea. "Nothing special." And he looked at her for a long time, studying her, as if memorizing every feature of her face, and wanted to say something else, but changed his mind. Instead, he started talking about his dahlias, which had turned out especially well this year. Now Sarah reproached herself for not asking, not finding out what he wanted to tell her. Maybe he sensed death approaching. At 73, Henry James Patterson looked vigorous, retained clarity of mind and firmness of character. A true old-school American intellectual, but his heart had always been weak. 10 years ago, they installed a pacemaker, and he often joked, "Now I'm a cyborg, I don't break." But the technology apparently failed. The following days passed in a fog. Sarah mechanically went to work at the library where she had worked for the last 15 years, answered readers' questions, issued books. None of her colleagues noticed the change in her mood. She hadn't been particularly talkative before. Only the director, Patricia Ann, with whom they had once studied together in the English literature department, asked, "You look so pale, Sarah. Are you sick?" "No, just didn't sleep well," she lied. Sarah didn't go to the funeral. She didn't want to meet Michael and his new fling. 2 years had passed since she accidentally discovered her husband's messages with some Jessica. In the evening, when Michael went to the shower, leaving his phone on the coffee table, a message came and the screen lit up. Sarah glanced mechanically and stopped, unable to tear herself away from the lines not meant for her eyes. 25 years of marriage crossed out by a few messages and photos she would prefer never to have seen. When she placed the phone on the table in front of Michael as he came out of the bathroom, he didn't even deny it. There was no outrage, no attempts to justify himself, just some weary resignation. "You understand," he said then, looking somewhere past her at the old china cabinet where their wedding photos stood. "At our age, there's no great love anymore. It's just convenient with you, but I'm tired of the routine. Forgive me." The words convenient and routine hurt more than the betrayal itself. It turned out that everything she considered calm happiness, their measured evenings, shared dinners, rare but cozy trips to the cabin, for him was a burdensome duty. Or maybe it always was. Sarah silently packed the essentials into an old suitcase, a battered roller bag with which they once went to Florida, and went to her friend Grace, whom she had known since school. A week later, she rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. Small but clean, with a view of the park. Her modest library salary allowed her to make ends meet, but no more. Formally, she and Michael never divorced. He kept postponing the trip to City Hall, saying he was busy, that there was a rush at work. She didn't insist. And then she learned from mutual acquaintances that Jessica was expecting a child. The 29-year-old office manager from the firm where Michael worked as department head was expecting her first. And the father, of course, was him. The news stung painfully, but then a strange relief came. Divorce became less important. Why the paperwork, if life had already put a period? The only person from her past life with whom Sarah kept in touch was Henry James Patterson. He called her himself a month after she left Michael. "I don't know what happened between you," he said then, and there was no judgment in his voice, only deep sadness. "And I don't want to interfere, but I want you to know, for me, you'll always be family. I've come to think of you as a daughter, and don't want to lose you because of Michael's decisions, whatever they were." Sarah almost cried then, listening to him. For the first time in the month after breaking up with her husband, she didn't cry when she found women's things in their apartment. Didn't cry when packing the suitcase, didn't cry even when Grace, trying to console her, said all men are bastards. But her father-in-law's warm words breached the wall she had built around her feelings. They met every 2 weeks at a small cafe near his house, where they served excellent cottage cheese pancakes, or at his cabin when summer came. Henry James Patterson was an avid gardener. He grew not only ordinary apples and plums, but also exotic apricots and cherries for the Midwest. "This is a challenge to the climate," he said, tending to the fragile seedlings, proof that a person can adapt to any conditions if they put in the effort. They never talked about Michael. Henry James Patterson told her about his work. He taught part-time at the State Technical University until the end, leading a special course on materials science, about the books he read, about his travels in his youth. He had traveled the entire United States from San Diego to Alaska as part of expeditions. Sometimes he remembered his late wife Margaret Paul, my beacon in life's storms, as he called her. And Sarah brought him fresh baked goods from old family recipes, helped with household chores, and felt needed. It seemed that in those short hours she regained herself. Not just an ex-wife abandoned for a young mistress, but a person valued for her inner qualities. Now he was gone, and she had to endure another loss, meeting her ex-husband and his new family. Sarah understood they would definitely be at the will reading. Michael always expected his father to leave him the apartment downtown and the cabin. They often talked about it, planning how to dispose of the inheritance. "The old man is still tough, but sooner or later it will all be ours," he said. And Sarah always cut off such conversations. Now the apartment and cabin would surely go to him and Jessica, and perhaps Michael would finally file for divorce to formalize the new marriage. Wednesday morning turned out damp. Low grey clouds hung over the city, threatening to pour rain at any moment. Sarah hadn't slept well. All night she dreamed of Henry James Patterson saying something to her, but she couldn't make out the words. She woke up with a headache and heaviness in her heart. In the kitchen, she brewed strong Earl Grey tea in memory of her father-in-law, though she preferred plain black herself, and she began to get ready. She took out the black suit from the closet, saved for special occasions. Strict, with a skirt just below the knees and a fitted jacket. She bought it 3 years ago for a library corporate event dedicated to her anniversary. Michael then said, "Why spend on an expensive thing? There's nowhere to wear it anyway." But she insisted and didn't regret it. Now the suit was a bit tight. In 2 years of solitude, she had gained a few pounds, eating irregularly and often soothing her longing with sweets, but she still looked strict and dignified in it. The grey strands she used to be ashamed of and dye now framed her face in a silver frame. "Your greys are noble," Henry James Patterson said. "They're like a crown of wisdom. Don't hide them." Before leaving, Sarah looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. A woman with tired eyes, but a straight back and raised chin, looked back. "You'll manage," she said to her reflection. "You're stronger than you think." She got to the notary's office by taxi, not wanting to risk being late on the subway. She spent almost a day's budget on the ride. But today it didn't matter. The driver, a silent Armenian with thick mustaches, seemed to sense her mood and didn't bother with talk, only quietly turned on the radio, playing old American songs. When Blue Skirt Waltz by Frankie Yankovic started, Sarah involuntarily smiled. Henry James Patterson's mother loved that song, and he often recalled how she sang it while preparing dinner. Getting out of the car at the 4-story pre-war building where the notary's office was located, Sarah immediately saw them. Michael, noticeably plumper in these 2 years, in an unbuttoned coat and a carelessly tied scarf, and next to him a young woman with a baby in her arms. They stood under the awning at the entrance, waiting out the starting light rain. At first, Sarah didn't recognize Jessica. She had changed a lot after childbirth. A rounder face, dark circles under her eyes, hair carelessly pulled into a ponytail. There was no trace left of that flashy girl with bright makeup whose photos she had seen on her husband's phone. Only the self-assured gaze remained the same. The baby in her arms, a boy wrapped in a blue blanket with chubby cheeks, apparently no older than 3 months, whimpered capriciously, and Jessica rocked him with obvious irritation. Sarah's heart clenched with pain and resentment that it turned out hadn't gone anywhere, just hidden deep inside. For 2 years, she had almost learned not to think about the betrayal, focusing on work and rare meetings with Henry James Patterson. But now, seeing them together with the child she herself had once dreamed of, all the barely healed wounds opened again. They were already heading to the door when Michael turned and noticed his ex-wife. Confusion flashed on his face, then he nodded awkwardly, like to a casual acquaintance. Jessica followed his gaze, and her eyes narrowed. She held the child tighter and whispered something in Michael's ear. Sarah felt her feet glued to the asphalt. Her first impulse was to turn and leave, get into the first taxi and return home to her quiet apartment, with bookshelves and the eternally unfinished throw on the armchair. Why all this? Why see them together? Why reopen old wounds? Why listen to how Henry James Patterson's property, His cozy apartment with antique furniture, his cabin with lovingly grown trees, passes to his son and his new family. But something in the notary's voice when he spoke of Henry James Patterson's last wish made her take a deep breath and head to the entrance. Raindrops fell on her face, mixing with unbidden tears that she immediately wiped away with the back of her hand. "I'll do this for you, Henry James Patterson," she thought, climbing the steps. "This will be my last gift to the man who didn't betray." The notary's office smelled of furniture polish and old papers. This smell reminded Sarah of the library where she worked. The same shelves with folders, the same strict curtains on the windows, muffling the street noise. Only instead of readers, here were people with tense faces, come to resolve issues of inheritance, gifting, wills, all that related to the transfer of property from one hand to another. The secretary, a young girl in a strict suit, checked the documents and asked to wait in the reception area. Sarah sat in the farthest corner, took out a worn volume of Dickinson from her bag, a book given to her once by Henry James Patterson. "So you always remember that a woman's strength is not in beauty, but in wisdom and resilience," he said then. Now she couldn't concentrate on the lines. The letters blurred before her eyes. Michael and Jessica sat opposite. Jessica whispered something to the child, adjusting the lace corner of the blanket. Michael nervously tapped his fingers on the armrest, glancing at his watch every now and then. He always did that when nervous. Sarah remembered that habit. 25 years together. They knew everything about each other, or so it seemed to her. Through the half-open door of the notary's office came muffled voices. Apparently the previous case was wrapping up. Finally, the door swung open and an elderly couple came out. The woman wiped tears with a handkerchief. The man supported her by the elbow, quietly consoling her. "Patterson family, please," came the voice of Notary Peters, whom Sarah recognized from the phone conversation. Michael jumped up first, gallantly offered his hand to Jessica, helping her rise with the child in her arms. Sarah stood last, slowly, as if forcing herself to take each step. The notary's office turned out spacious, with high ceilings and an antique oak desk, behind which sat Peters himself. A thin man of about 50, with attentive brown eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. He gestured for everyone to sit and got straight to business. "Allow me to offer condolences on the passing of Henry James Patterson. Today we are gathered for the reading of his last will, expressed in the will drawn up and notarized a month ago." A month ago, right after their last meeting. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. So he did sense his death. "Allow me to introduce those present," the notary continued. "Peters, Andrew Victor, notary. And now I ask you to introduce yourselves." "Patterson, Michael Henry," Michael said with importance, "the only son of the deceased." "Jessica Patterson," Jessica quickly added, though Sarah knew they weren't married. "Wife of Michael Henry." The notary looked at her attentively, slightly raising an eyebrow, but said nothing, just made a note in the papers. And he turned his gaze to Sarah. "Patterson, Sarah Elizabeth," she said quietly. "Wife of Michael Henry." Jessica flinched, and Michael turned red. "Ex-wife?" he clarified sharply. "We haven't lived together for 2 years." "Nevertheless, the legal marriage is not dissolved," the notary noted dryly, making another note. "Forgive the awkward question, but I must clarify. This child," he nodded at the infant, "is he the son or daughter of Michael Henry?" "Son," Jessica indignantly replied. "Of course it's his son, Ethan. He's 3 months old." "Is the birth registered? Is there a birth certificate indicating paternity?" "Yes." Jessica began rummaging in her bag. "Here, please." The notary carefully studied the document, made another note, and returned the certificate. "Thank you. And now let's proceed to the reading of the will." He took several sheets from a folder, put on glasses, and began reading in an official tone. "I, Henry James Patterson, being of sound mind and firm memory, make this will of my own free will. All property belonging to me, namely, apartment at Elm Street 26, apartment 7, Lake House with land in the Lakeside Association, Ford Focus, 2018 model year, funds in accounts at Bank of America, shares of Apple Inc., in the amount of 300 as well. as all other movable and immovable property that will belong to me on the day of death. Sarah listened half-heartedly, surveying the office. On the wall hung a portrait of an elderly man with medals on his chest, probably the notary's father or grandfather. In the cabinet behind glass stood thick volumes of legal acts, and on the windowsill bloomed a violet, just like the one Henry James Patterson once gave her for her new apartment. Jessica's gaze was fixed on the notary's lips. She impatiently tapped her foot, clearly struggling not to hurry him. Michael sat with a smug smile. It was clear he didn't doubt his right to the inheritance for a second. I bequeath to Sarah Elizabeth Patterson, wife of my son. The notary's voice suddenly cut through the fog in Sarah's head. What? She hadn't misheard. To her? Peters paused, looking at her over his glasses, and repeated, I bequeath to Sarah Elizabeth Patterson, wife of my son. Dead silence fell in the room. Even the child, who had been quietly whimpering before, fell silent as if listening too. This is some mistake, Michael exploded, jumping up. Dad couldn't have written that. He always said the apartment and cabin would go to me. Please, calm down and sit, the notary said firmly. I haven't finished reading the document. There are additional conditions here. Michael plopped back into the chair, his face covered in red spots. Jessica froze like a statue, clutching the child so tightly that he whimpered again. In the event that Sarah Elizabeth accepts the inheritance, I ask her to take care of my collection of books on art and history. Either keep it or donate it to the city's public library. If Sarah Elizabeth for any reason refuses the inheritance, all the above-listed property should be transferred to the Hope's Light Foundation for Children with Cancer, the notary concluded. What? Michael jumped up again. Dad disinherited me? Completely? This is impossible. Someone forged the will. The will is drawn up according to all rules, Peters replied calmly. Henry James Patterson was fully competent, as confirmed by a medical opinion he prudently attached to the documents, anticipating possible disputes. His signature is notarized. Witnesses were present at the drafting. You, of course, have the right to contest the will in court, but I must warn you, the chances are slim. Jessica suddenly burst into tears, loudly with sobs. What will happen now? She whimpered. Where will we live with the child? How can we be left without a roof over our heads? Sarah sat stunned. She couldn't believe what was happening. Henry James Patterson left her all his property. Why? Did he really consider her a daughter, as he often said? I would like to add, the notary continued when Jessica calmed down a bit, that in addition to the official will, Henry James Patterson left a personal letter that he asked to be read to all present. It has no legal force, but it was his last wish. He took a folded sheet of paper from an envelope and began reading, Dear Sarah, if you're hearing these lines, it means I'm no longer alive. Forgive me for such an unexpected turn with the inheritance, but I thought about this decision for a long time. You were more than a daughter-in-law to me. You became the daughter I never had. All these years, I saw your kindness, care, sincere attention to me and my odd old man quirks. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Let them see how she loved this man, how grateful she was to him for everything. When you left Michael, I was devastated, not for my son, for you. I knew sooner or later it would happen. Michael was always like me in my youth, just as selfish, thinking only of himself. I changed when I met his mother. But Mikey, unfortunately, never grew up. I knew about his affair with that girl, knew about the child who was to be born, and saw how you suffered, though you never complained. Michael sat with his head down, his shoulders slumped, as if an invisible weight pressed on them. I leave you everything I have, not to punish my son, but because I believe you'll dispose of this property wisely and worthily. I want you to have a new chance to start life from a clean slate, without burdensome memories. Perhaps you'll want to sell the apartment and cabin, move to another city. That's your right. I only ask to preserve my books. They were my faithful friends all my life. Jessica no longer cried, her face twisted in anger, her eyes narrowed to slits. As for you, son, the notary paused, looking at Michael, I hope this decision will make you rethink your life. Everything you had, you got too easily. From me. Perhaps now, when you'll have to achieve everything yourself, you'll learn to value not only material goods, but also the people around you. By losing Sarah, you lost the most valuable thing in your life. She was your guardian angel, and you didn't notice it. And now, I'm afraid, it's too late to fix anything. Stop! Michael suddenly shouted, jumping up. This is mockery. My father couldn't have written that. You conspired with her, right? He pointed at Sarah. How much did she pay you for this forgery? Michael Henry, the notary said in an icy tone, I understand your state, but I ask you to control yourself. All documents are authentic, and I recommend you not aggravate the situation with unfounded accusations. How could you? Michael turned to Sarah, his eyes bloodshot. You planned all this, right? Wormed your way into the old man's trust, turned him against me. It wasn't enough for you our years together. So you decided to take my father's inheritance too? Jessica tugged at his sleeve, looking at the notary. Calm down, Mikey, no need. We'll just sue, right? We'll prove the old man wasn't in his right mind when he wrote this. We have a small child. We need somewhere to live. Sarah wiped her tears and raised her gaze. For the first time in 2 years, she looked straight into her ex-husband's eyes. Not with resentment, not with anger, but with some new feeling akin to pity. I didn't turn anyone against you, Mikey, she said quietly. You didn't need help to lose your father's trust. You managed that yourself. She turned to the notary. Can I get a copy of the will? And the letter too, if possible. Of course, Peters nodded. I've prepared all the documents. You'll need to formalize the acceptance of the inheritance within 6 months. I'll explain everything in order. You'll regret this, Michael hissed, heading to the exit. I won't leave it like this. We'll sue, Jessica chimed in, rocking the crying child from the noise. You won't get away with stealing what's supposed to be ours. They burst out of the office, slamming the door loudly. Sarah and the notary were left alone. I'm very sorry it turned out this way, Peters said after a pause. Henry James Patterson warned that the reaction would be emotional, but he was very firm in his decision. And me? I don't know what to do with all this, Sarah honestly admitted. I never thought he felt that way about me. If you need advice on how best to dispose of the property, I'm always at your service, the notary said softly. Henry James Patterson spoke very warmly of you. I almost envy such family attachment. Thank you, Sarah smiled weakly. I think I'll go. I have a lot to think about. Leaving the office, she didn't call a taxi, decided to walk despite the rain. Drops drummed on her umbrella, but Sarah barely noticed them. Her mind swirled with lines from Henry James Patterson's letter, unexpectedly opening her eyes to much in her life with Michael. She never thought she was a guardian angel for her husband. She considered herself an ordinary wife, not too beautiful, not particularly talented, just there. But from the outside it looked different. Lost in thought, Sarah didn't immediately notice someone following her. Turning, she saw Michael. Without Jessica, soaked, with disheveled hair. We need to talk, he said hoarsely, catching up to her. Sarah, please, let's just talk. Sarah stopped, gripping the umbrella handle tighter. The rain intensified, turning into a real downpour. Murky streams ran along the asphalt, carrying fallen leaves into storm drains. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. What do we have to talk about, Mikey? She asked quietly, looking not at her ex-husband, but somewhere over his shoulder at the grey veil of rain. It seems everything has already been said by your father, by you, by me. Give me at least a chance to explain. There was a plea in his voice, completely uncharacteristic of the old Michael. Let's go somewhere dry. There's a cafe across the street. Sarah hesitated. Common sense told her it was better to leave now. Why reopen old wounds? Why listen to excuses? But something in her ex-husband's lost gaze, in his slouched figure, in his wet hair stuck to his forehead, made her nod. The cafe was almost empty. Only an elderly couple in the corner finishing their pastries and a bored waitress wiping tables. They took a table by the window with a view of the wet street. Michael ordered coffee and brandy. Sarah, just tea. You were always indifferent to alcohol, Michael noted with a crooked smile, and I've started tipping back more than I should. He downed the shot in one gulp, winced and stared out the window. You know, when Dad got sick last year, I thought, here it starts, he said quietly. Soon I'll be burying the old man, and I imagined how I'd dispose of his property. It sounds low, but it's true. I was counting on his inheritance. Thought Jessica and I would live. Large, you never could hide your thoughts, Sarah replied. Even from your father. Probably he saw right through you. Turns out so, Michael chuckled mirthlessly. You know, when he recovered after that attack, I was disappointed. On one hand, I was glad Dad was alive, but on the other, I'd already planned to rent out his apartment, how we'd vacation on the proceeds. God, what kind of person am I? He hid his face in his palms. Sarah was silent. What could she say? That it's okay, that she understands. But she didn't understand. Henry James Patterson was almost like a father to her, and the thought of profiting from his death never crossed her mind. Then Jessica appeared. Michael continued, regaining control of his emotions. Young, fun, without hang-ups, looked at me like a hero. And I melted like a kid. You understand, Sarah, with you I always felt not good enough. You're so proper, so perfect. And with her it was easy and simple. Sarah listened without interrupting. Strangely, the pain she expected to feel hearing about her husband's new lover wasn't there. Only fatigue and some emptiness. When she got pregnant, I got scared, Michael admitted. Wanted her to have an abortion, but she dug in. Either marry me or pay child support. And I fell for the blackmail, kept thinking, I'll divorce Sarah, marry Jess, Dad dies and we'll live high on his money. And what about love? Sarah couldn't hold back. You said you fell in love. What love? Michael laughed bitterly. There was passion, yes. But it passed quickly, especially when Jessica started whining, bossing, demanding more and more. After giving birth, she went crazy. Wants a nanny, a new coat, vacation in Hawaii. And my salary isn't rubber and Dad won't give money. Thinks I should support my new family myself. The waitress brought tea and a second portion of brandy that Michael ordered with a gesture. Sarah cupped the hot mug, warming her chilled fingers. You know, when you left, I was even glad at first, Michael continued, downing the new shot. Thought, freedom. No one will nag about socks scattered around or dirty dishes, but then the house became so empty and quiet. I used to get angry when you played your classical music. Then I caught myself missing Tchaikovsky and Vivaldi. But you didn't call, Sarah noted, didn't try to get me back. Pride wouldn't let me, Michael shrugged. And what would I say? Sorry, dear, I made a mistake. You wouldn't forgive anyway, and I'd feel like a complete loser. Then everything spun with Jessica, with the child. I thought, new life, new happiness. And are you? Happy. Sarah raised her eyes to him. Michael looked away. Happy? Number Jessica. She's not at all what she seemed at first. She saw me only as a wallet. And when she realized there wouldn't be big money, that Dad wasn't going to sponsor my flings. Well, you saw today what she's really like. Outside the window, the rain finally subsided. Rare passers-by hurried about their business, jumping over puddles. The cafe was warm and cozy, smelling of fresh baking. Michael looked at Sarah with some hidden hope. What do you want from me, Mikey? She asked directly. Why did you call me for this talk? I. He faltered, gathering his thoughts. I want to ask you, maybe we could be together again. I know I caused you pain, but maybe not all is lost. 25 years together isn't a joke. We had something good, right? Sarah looked at him for a long time. Here it was, the moment she had dreamed of all those months after the separation. Michael asking her to come back. A year ago, she probably would have thrown herself into his arms, forgiven everything, forgotten the humiliations and pain. But now, what about Jessica? She asked. And the child? It's over with Jessica, Michael waved his hand. After today, she'll leave me, clear as day. Probably already found the next sponsor. And with the child, I'll pay child support, of course. Maybe see him sometimes, but I don't want to live with her anymore. And I can't. So you're abandoning your son? Sarah shook her head. The child isn't guilty of anything, Mikey. I'm not abandoning, he protested, but I can't live with a woman I don't love just for the child. That would be unfair to her and to me. And were you fair to me? Sarah asked quietly. When you cheated, lied, built a new life behind my back? Michael lowered his head. No, I was a scoundrel. And I understand I may not deserve forgiveness, but Sarah, haven't I earned at least a chance in 25 years? One single chance to fix everything? Sarah looked at him, at his thinning hair with grey at the temples, at the wrinkles around his eyes, at his hands with protruding veins. The same and not the same, once beloved, then betraying, and now. Who was he to her? Now. I don't know, Mikey, she answered honestly. Right now, I can't promise you anything. Too much has piled up. Henry James Patterson's death, this unexpected inheritance, our meeting. I need time. We have time, Michael perked up. Just don't throw me out on the street. I literally have nowhere to go. Jessica will put my things out the door as soon as I return, that's clear. You want to live in Henry James Patterson's apartment? Sarah was surprised. In your father's apartment, whom you essentially betrayed, dreaming of his death? Michael blushed. Stupid idea, huh? He smiled crookedly. You know, I don't even understand what I'm thinking. I just feel cornered. No money, no housing, no family. Everything collapsed in one day. You have a job, Sarah reminded. You always earned well. Rent an apartment, start from scratch. Maybe it'll be useful to feel what it's like when no one supports you, no one lends a shoulder. You're angry, Michael stated, and you have the right. I'll understand if you refuse to help. Just think, about us, about what was good, about what could be. He paid and stood up, throwing on his wet jacket. Outside, the rain started again, but not as heavy. I'll call you in a few days, he said goodbye. Maybe by then you'll decide what to do with the inheritance and with me. Sarah watched him leave, hunched, aged, lost. Once she loved this man with all her heart, ready to give her life for him. And now she watched almost indifferently as he walked in the rain, forgetting to open his umbrella. Returning home, she stood under a hot shower for a long time, washing away not so much the rain moisture as the heaviness of the past day. Thoughts swirled around Henry James Patterson's words, I want you to have a new chance to start life from a clean slate, without burdensome memories. Maybe she should sell everything and leave. To some quiet coastal town, or conversely to the countryside where no one knows her, where there are no ghosts of the past. Start a new life without Michael, without memories, without pain. The next day, she called the notary. Andrew Victor, I'd like to consult about the inheritance, she said. How do you feel about meeting tomorrow? Of course, Sarah Elizabeth, Peters replied. I'll be waiting for you at 10 in the morning. And I have information for you that Henry James Patterson asked to convey personally, without outsiders. It concerns one opportunity he provided for you. Intrigued, Sarah hung up. What else had her father-in-law planned? And why didn't he say it in life? In the evening, Grace called, the same friend at whose place Sarah lived right after leaving her husband. Sarah, how are you? She asked without preamble. I heard Henry James Patterson died. Were you at the funeral? No, Sarah sighed heavily, but I was at the will reading. And imagine. She told her friend everything, about the unexpected inheritance, about Michael and Jessica's reaction, about the subsequent talk with her ex-husband. So he wants to come back. Grace was outraged. Now that you're a rich heiress. What a scoundrel. I told you right away, don't trust him. All men are the same, they'll betray at the first chance. Not all, Sarah objected softly. Henry James Patterson didn't betray. That's true, Grace agreed. Good parents can have such kids. So what have you decided? Will you take him back? I don't know, Sarah admitted. I don't feel anything special for him anymore. No love, no hate, just fatigue. But that was 25 years of my life. Not so easy to cross it all out. Watch out, don't get burned again, Grace warned. Now he's repenting, but once he gets his, he'll start eyeing young ones again. After talking with her friend, Sarah couldn't sleep for a long time. Before her eyes stood Michael's face as it was today, confused and pitiful. And as it was before the betrayal, smiling, familiar. Could she ever love him again? Or at least just live beside him without constantly remembering the betrayal? In the middle of the night, a phone call woke her. The number was unknown. Hello, Sarah answered sleepily. Is that you, bitch? Came a drunken female voice. You who stole the inheritance. Think you'll get away with it? I'll get you. Sarah hung up. Jessica apparently had drunk for courage and decided to say everything she thought. The phone rang again, but Sarah didn't answer. Then again and again. Finally, she just turned it off. In the morning, getting ready for the meeting with the notary, she found 3 messages on voicemail, all from Jessica, all with threats and insults. Need to change the number, Sarah thought, deleting the recordings. The notary greeted her with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Sarah Elizabeth. I'm glad you came. I have something interesting for you. Henry James Patterson not only left you an inheritance, but also took care of your future in a more long-term perspective." "Long-term perspective," Sarah repeated, sitting in the chair opposite the notary's desk. "What do you mean?" Peters took a thick envelope with a wax seal from the desk drawer. "Henry James Patterson was a very foresightful man," he began, smoothing the envelope on the table. "He understood that inheritance is important, but no less important is to dispose of it properly, especially for someone who never had big money." Sarah nodded. Indeed, even the approximate value of her father-in-law's property, the apartment downtown, the cabin, the car, the shares, made her slightly dizzy. She had never handled such sums. "Henry James Patterson left you, let's say, instructions," the notary continued, opening the envelope. "He didn't want this to be part of the official will, since, in his words, it would seem too imposing. But he very much asked to convey it to you." He took out several sheets written in the familiar, neat handwriting of her father-in-law. "You can read this letter yourself," Peters said, handing her the papers. And here he placed another document on the table: papers for property in Monterey. A small 2-story cottage on the outskirts of the town, 5 minutes' walk from the ocean, and a plot of land next to it. In Monterey, Sarah was surprised, but Henry James Patterson didn't have property there, as far as I know. "He bought this house 2 months ago," the notary explained. "Specifically for you." In the letter, he explains why. Sarah unfolded the sheets and began reading Henry James Patterson's handwriting. So familiar, so dear. It caused a new wave of grief. He's gone, and there will never be letters, long talks over tea, wise advice. "Dear Sarah," her father-in-law wrote, "if you're reading these lines, it means you already know about my decision to leave you all my property. Perhaps Michael is now trying to regain your favor. I know my son well, but I want you to remember, you deserve more. I bought you a house in Monterey, a small town on the coast where Margaret and I spent our honeymoon. A quiet, cozy place with an amazing atmosphere. There are good, friendly people, clean air, and stunning sunsets over the ocean. On the first floor of the house, you can set up what you always dreamed of: a small cafe. Remember, you told me how in your youth you wanted to run your own little bakery. Now you have that opportunity. There's already all the necessary equipment. I tried to consider all the details. Don't think I'm imposing my vision of your future. You're free to do as you see fit. Sell everything and buy an apartment downtown, invest in business, or just put the money in the bank and live off the interest. But I'm offering you the chance to start a new life away from the past, away from Michael and everything that caused you pain. In the envelope, you'll find contacts for my old friend Robert Paul Simmons. He lives in Monterey, knows about the house, and will help you settle in if you decide to move there. Once again, this is just a suggestion, not an obligation. I just want you to know there's a place where you can start from a clean slate, without the burden of the past, without burdensome memories. Be happy, my dear. You deserve it more than anyone. Your Henry James Patterson." Sarah finished the letter, not hiding her tears. How well he knew her, how subtly he understood. In her youth, before meeting Michael, she really dreamed of opening a small bakery where she'd bake pastries from her grandmother's recipes. But then life turned out differently. Marriage, work at the library, everyday cares. And the dream remained a dream. "He told me about this house," the notary said quietly, "said it was the best place for a new beginning, especially for such a talented woman as you." "Talented?" Sarah raised her tear-wet eyes to him. "No," Henry James Patterson clearly exaggerated. "I'm an ordinary woman, nothing remarkable." "He said otherwise," Peters objected softly. "Said you cook wonderfully, that you have golden hands and a kind heart, and that his son couldn't appreciate his happiness." Sarah embarrassedly lowered her eyes. She wasn't used to compliments. Michael rarely praised her, considering all household cares something taken for granted. "Well, now I need to think seriously," she said, gathering the documents. Thank you for everything. You've been kind to me. I'm just fulfilling the deceased's will," the notary smiled. "And if you'll allow me to give advice, don't rush decisions, especially those concerning personal life. Sometimes it's worth taking a pause to understand what you really want." Leaving the office, Sarah didn't go. Straight home, her feet carried her to the waterfront. She loved this place, especially off-season when it was deserted. The river, grey and cold, carried its waters to the lake, and on the other shore, silhouettes of new buildings loomed, faceless, identical. But for someone, they were home, a place where they were waited for, and no one had waited for her for 2 years. And now she had a choice: return to the past or allow herself a new start, in an unfamiliar town, among unfamiliar people. Scary, but perhaps that's exactly what she wanted all this time, a new point of reference. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. "Michael. Sarah, can I come over today?" he asked without preamble. "We need to talk seriously." "About what, Mikey?" "I think we discussed everything yesterday." "No, not everything." Determination sounded in his voice. "I thought a lot last night and realized I was an idiot. All this time, not just the last 2 years but before, I didn't appreciate what I had, who I had beside me. Please give me a chance to fix everything. I'll come this evening." "Okay?" Sarah hesitated with the answer. Part of her, the one that still remembered the happy years of their marriage, wanted to agree. But another part, grown stronger in these 2 years of solitude, resisted. "Okay," she finally said. Come at 7, but I promise nothing, Mikey, understand?" "I understand," relief sounded in his voice. "Thanks. I'll be there." In the evening, setting the table, Sarah felt a strange calm. She took out the good porcelain set, a wedding gift from Michael's parents, saved for special occasions. Brewed tea, sliced the pie bought on the way. Nothing special, just dinner for a talk. Not a date, not reconciliation, just a conversation between two adults once close to each other. Michael arrived exactly at 7 with a bouquet of burgundy roses, her favorites, in an ironed shirt, shaved, combed. He smelled of familiar cologne. That's how she remembered him in the early years of their marriage, when he still tried to impress. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," he said, entering the apartment. "I was worried you'd change your mind." "I keep my word," Sarah replied simply, taking the bouquet. "Come in. Tea's ready." They sat at the table as in their past life, facing each other. Only before there was habitual closeness between them, and now 2 years of separation and a whole abyss of distrust. "How did the meeting with the notary go?" Michael asked, taking the cup from her hands. "Fine." Sarah didn't go into details. "We discussed formal issues of accepting the inheritance." "Ah, have you decided what to do with Dad's apartment?" "And the cabin?" There it is, Sarah thought, the real reason for his visit. But aloud she said, "Not yet. I need time to think it all over." Michael stirred the tea in his cup, and the clink of the spoon against porcelain echoed in the room's silence. "Sarah, I want to be completely honest with you," he began, setting aside the spoon. "Yes, initially I called you because of the inheritance. Forgive me, but it's true. I was desperate. Jessica kicked me out. Almost no money, nowhere to live. And I thought, maybe you'll take pity." Sarah looked at him silently, not interrupting. For the first time in all their acquaintance, he spoke to her so frankly. "But then," Michael continued, "then I suddenly realized this is a chance. A chance to fix everything, to return to you, to the woman who was by my side for 25 years and never betrayed. I was a blind idiot, Sarah. Thought I deserved more, that life was passing me by. But in fact, I destroyed the real thing I had myself." He spoke, and she recalled their life together, the good and bad, joys and grievances. Recalled how she once loved this man so much she was ready to forgive him everything. "But now, Mikey," she interrupted him softly, "I appreciate your honesty. Really. But I'm not sure we can return to the past. Too much has changed." "I've changed." "I understand," he nodded. "But maybe we don't need to return. Maybe we'll start from a clean slate, as if we just met. I'm ready to court you, win you over, prove I'm worthy of a second chance. He reached across the table and touched her fingers. The touch evoked a strange feeling. Not warmth, not cold, just nothing. I have some savings, Michael continued, not noticing her reaction. I could rent an apartment, get a job closer to your house. We'd start dating, go to movies, theatre, cafes. Like before, remember? When we were just starting. Sarah carefully freed her hand and stood up, went to the window. Outside, dusk was gathering, lights turning on in neighboring houses. Someone returning from work, someone walking a dog. Ordinary evening life going on. You know, Mikey, she said without turning, today I learned that Henry James Patterson bought me a house in Monterey. Small, 2-story with a plot. On the first floor, I can make a cafe. My old dream. Remember I told you once? A cafe. Michael was surprised. But you're a librarian. What cafe? Before the library, I studied baking for 2 years, Sarah reminded, and always wanted my own little business. But then we got married. You thought it unserious, and I dropped the idea. And you? You want to leave? To this? What's it, Monterey? Yes, I'm thinking about it. Start a new life away from the past. Open a small cafe, bake pies, interact with people. Michael rose from the table, approached, and stood beside her at the window. I could go with you, he suggested after a pause. Help with the cafe, handle the books. I was always good with numbers, you know. Sarah turned to him. Why, Mikey? Why do you need to go to a small town where there are no career prospects, no entertainment? You always loved the big city, noisy companies, opportunities. And there, quiet, measured life, simple people. For you, he answered simply. I realized, Sarah, that without you it's empty. Money, career, entertainment, all meaningless when there's no one beside you who truly understands and accepts you. Sarah looked at him, and for the first time that evening felt something like the old feeling. A light warmth, an echo of what once was between them. But was it enough? I need to think, she said. This is a serious decision for both of us. I understand, Michael nodded. How much time do you need? I don't know. A week? Maybe 2. I want to go to Monterey, see the house, the town, understand if this new life suits me. Let's go together, he suggested. This weekend I'll borrow a car from a friend. We could. No, Sarah stopped him softly but firmly. I want to go alone. This is my decision, Mikey. My life. He looked disappointed but didn't argue. Okay, as you say. But you'll call me after the trip. Tell me how it went. Definitely. She promised. When he left, Sarah sat in the apartment's silence for a long time, going over their conversation in her head. Michael seemed sincere, truly repentant. But wasn't the same selfishness hidden behind this repentance? Wouldn't his love disappear if he realized she wasn't going to share the inheritance with him? The next day, Sarah took time off from the library and went to the station. The train to Monterey left at noon. The journey took about 5 hours. She bought a ticket for a compartment, took a book and some food for the road. On the train, she reread Henry James Patterson's letter again. You deserve more, he wrote. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps it's time to stop clinging to the past and allow herself to dream of the future. Monterey greeted her with bright sun and fresh ocean breeze. Unexpected for October, the small, cozy town with neat streets descending to the sea immediately appealed to Sarah. She took a taxi from the station, and the grey-haired driver with a full beard eagerly told her about the town as they drove to the house. So you're going to Henry James Patterson's house? He perked up hearing the address. Good man, rest in peace, came here a few times, inspected everything, did repairs, said preparing for his daughter. Not exactly daughter, Sarah blushed. Daughter-in-law. Well, he called you daughter, the driver shrugged, said, doing it for my daughter so she lives well. The house turned out exactly as she imagined reading Henry James Patterson's letter. 2-story, light brick, with a tiled roof and a small terrace overlooking the garden. The plot was well kept, clearly cared for, though the trees had already shed leaves, and the flower beds were empty until next spring. Sarah opened the gate and walked along the path paved with colourful tiles to the front door. In her hands were the keys given by the notary. Still, she felt like an uninvited guest. almost a thief sneaking into someone else's space. The front door opened before she could get the keys. On the threshold stood an elderly man with a welcoming face, in a homemade knit sweater and old-fashioned horn-rimmed glasses. "Sarah Elizabeth?" he asked with a smile. "And I've been waiting for you. Robert Paul Simmons, friend of Henry James Patterson. Come in, don't stand on the threshold." Sarah uncertainly crossed the threshold. The hallway smelled of fresh-baked bread and some herbs. "I prepared tea," Robert Paul said, helping her take off her coat. "You need to warm up after the road. Here, though it's the coast, the wind from the ocean chills to the bone." They went into the living room, spacious, bright, with large windows and furniture in the 60s style, clearly chosen with taste. In the corner stood an old radio, and on the walls hung watercolor landscapes of local views. "Like it?" the host asked, noticing how Sarah examined the furnishings. "This is all Henry James Patterson. He had excellent taste," said. "I want the house to remind of the time when we were young." And collected all this from thrift stores and antique shops. Sarah sank into a soft armchair, feeling strange excitement. This house, created with such love and attention to detail, was meant for her new life. "Tell me about Henry James Patterson," she asked, taking a cup of aromatic tea from Robert Paul's hands. "Have you known each other long?" "Since college," the host smiled. "Over 50 years. Studied together, then worked. Then life took us different ways. I settled here, he stayed in the city. But we always kept in touch, corresponded, called. And when these new technologies appeared, Skype, WhatsApp, we saw each other more often, though virtually." "And he told you about me?" Sarah still couldn't get used to the idea that she occupied such an important place in her father-in-law's life. Of course, Robert Paul nodded. "Always said, 'My Sarah this, my Sarah that. Very proud of you, especially your pies.' Said such deliciousness isn't served even in restaurants." Sarah smiled embarrassedly. Henry James Patterson really loved her baking, especially apple strudel from her grandmother's recipe. "He often lamented that his son doesn't appreciate you," Robert Paul continued. "Frankly, in an old man way, Mikey doesn't understand his happiness. Chases skirts, leaves real treasures at home. Forgive me if I'm prying." "It's okay," Sarah shook her head. "It's all in the past." "Exactly. In the past," the host perked up. Henry James Patterson always said, "Help Sarah leave the past behind and start a new life." That's why he bought the house and planned the cafe. "And what about the cafe?" Sarah inquired. "Did he really think everything through?" "And how?" Robert Paul rose. "Come, I'll show you." They went down to the first floor, where there was a large room with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean promenade. Inside, furniture was already arranged: cozy tables, chairs, bar counter. In the corner stood a professional coffee machine, and on the walls hung vintage photos of the town. "Everything's ready here," Robert Paul explained, leading her through the space. "The kitchen is fully equipped: ovens, mixers, refrigerators." Henry James Patterson consulted professionals, so everything was top-notch. Over there, he pointed to a glass display case, planned to display baked goods. And here, a gesture toward a corner with soft armchairs and bookshelves, a library area. "He said you love books and would like to combine it with the cafe." Sarah surveyed the space, and a picture began forming in her head. Morning light flooding the hall, smell of fresh baking, soft music, visitors leisurely chatting over coffee. Her dream embodied with such thoroughness and love by the man who truly wanted her happiness. This is amazing," she said, not hiding excitement. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept this gift and be happy," Robert Paul smiled. That's all Henry James Patterson wanted. Sarah slowly walked the space again, touching the counter surface, chair backs, book spines on the shelves with her fingertips. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think I'm starting to understand what Henry James Patterson meant by a new beginning. Here everything seems created especially for me, as if he knew me better than I know myself." "That's how it was," Robert Paul nodded. "He was very attentive to you, noticed everything, remembered everything, and really wanted, after all the upheavals in your life, for you to find your place, your home." They spent the rest of the day touring the house, spacious, bright, with large windows and furnishings thought out to the smallest detail. The second floor was fully residential: bedroom, living room, study, bathroom with a large tub on lion paws. He especially tried here, Robert Paul noted, showing the study with bookshelves to the ceiling. Said, Sarah loves classics, especially poetry, and collected a whole collection of rare editions. Toward evening, they returned to the living room, where Robert Paul set the table for dinner, simple but hearty, with homemade pickles and fish from local catch. I'll go now, he said when they finished, so you can settle in and think everything over. But if you need anything, I live across the street in the house with blue shutters. Call any time. Left alone, Sarah sat in the living room for a long time, looking at the fire in the fireplace that Robert Paul had lit before leaving. Outside, the ocean roared, dull, measured, as if lulling the town. For the first time in a long time, she felt a strange peace, as if returning home after long wanderings. Before bed, she went out to the terrace. The night sky was strewn with stars, so bright you couldn't see them in the city due to constant light pollution. The fresh ocean wind played with her hair, bringing the smell of salt and seaweed. Maybe this is my path, Sarah thought, peering at the dark silhouette of the ocean on the horizon. New town, new business, new life. Without Michael, without past grievances, without the constant feeling that I'm not good enough. The morning sunbeam, piercing through the not fully drawn curtains, woke her. Sarah stretched in bed and for the first time in many months woke without the usual heaviness in her heart. She dressed quickly and went down to the future cafe space. In the morning light, it looked even cozier and more appealing. Sarah went to the kitchen, opened cabinets, inspected the appliances. Everything was new, sparkling, ready for use. On one shelf, she found a worn notebook. Opening it, she saw Henry James Patterson's familiar handwriting and the title, Recipes for Sarah's Cafe. He had collected dozens of recipes, from classic American pies to exquisite French desserts. Next to some were notes. Sarah likes with cinnamon, add more raisins, don't forget lemon zest. He remembered all her culinary preferences, all the little secrets she shared during their tea times. Sarah ran her hand over the pages, and tears welled up. Not bitter as before, but somehow light, cleansing. Henry James Patterson was gone, but left her not just material inheritance. He gave the opportunity to start anew, to embody the dream she herself had long buried under the weight of daily cares and disappointments. She spent the whole day in the town, walked the promenade, met neighbors, visited local shops and cafes, noting prices and service features. Monterey turned out exactly as Henry James Patterson described: quiet, cozy, with a measured rhythm of life where everyone knows each other and greets strangers warmly. In the evening, sitting on the terrace with a cup of tea, she made a decision. Of course, she'd need to handle many formalities, quit her job, organize the move, file papers for the cafe, but she felt this was the right choice, her choice. One question remained: what to do with Michael? She promised to call after the trip, tell about her impressions. But what to say? That she's leaving forever, starting a new life without him, or give him that second chance he asked for? Sarah took out her phone and dialed his number. Sarah? Joy sounded in Michael's voice. I was starting to worry. How are you? How's Monterey? Wonderful, she answered honestly. The town is marvelous, the house simply amazing. Henry James Patterson thought of everything to the smallest detail. You decided to move? He asked cautiously. Sarah took a deep breath. Yes, Mikey, I'm staying here. I'll open the cafe as I dreamed once. There was a pause. I understand, Michael finally said, and I'm happy for you. Really, you deserve to start over. Thanks. She was grateful for his understanding. And what about us? The question she expected and feared. My second chance. Sarah closed her eyes, gathering thoughts. Before her inner eye flashed scenes of their life together. Happy moments and bitter disappointments, youthful infatuation and mature alienation. You know, Mikey, she began slowly, I've thought a lot about this. About us. About what you said about a new beginning, and realized I can't just return to the past. Too much happened, too deep the wounds. I understand. His voice sounded dull, but Sarah continued, surprising herself. If you really want to start over, truly, from a clean slate, come to Monterey, not right away. Give me time to settle. A month? Maybe two. And then? Then we'll see. Really, hope flared in his voice, you'll let me come? Not to immediately move in or return to old relations, Sarah clarified firmly, but to try to get to know each other anew in a new place, without the burden of the past. To see if there's something real left between us besides habit and shared history. I'm in, Michael answered quickly. On your terms, And one more thing, Sarah interrupted. I want you to know, I'm doing this not because I fear loneliness or can't live without you. I can. I've learned to live on my own, and I like it. But I think 25 years is too long to just cross out without trying to save what can be saved, if there's anything to save. Thanks, Michael said simply, for the chance. I'll try not to miss it. After the talk, Sarah sat on the terrace for a long time, looking at the starry sky. Had she done the right thing giving Michael this chance? Wouldn't it be better to leave the past in the past, cut it off once and for all? But something deep inside told her this decision is right. Not because she still loved him, or couldn't live without him, but because she wanted to close this chapter of her life without regrets, without thoughts of what could have been if they tried once more. The sky over the ocean was strewn with stars, and a light breeze brought the smell of salt and freedom. New life, Sarah thought, breathing deeply. My new life. 2 months passed. Sarah stood at the window of her cafe, Home Comfort, and watched the first visitors take seats at cozy tables. Morning sun flooded the space with soft light, playing glints on the polished coffee machine. The air was filled with the aroma of fresh baking. Today she prepared apple strudel from her grandmother's recipe and honey gingerbread. The cafe opening was a week ago, modest but warm. Almost all neighbors came. Robert Paul gave a touching speech about Henry James Patterson and his dream for Sarah. The local newspaper printed a note about the new cozy spot smelling of home warmth. And since then, every morning started with pleasant bustle. Kneading dough, preparing fillings, arranging fresh flowers on tables. Sarah surprised herself. Where did the strength and energy come from? Just recently she felt like a woman tired of life approaching retirement, and now as if younger by 10 years. Her hair, which she stopped dyeing, silvered at the temples, but the wrinkles around her eyes softened, and her gaze became livelier. The move wasn't as hard as she feared. She rented the city apartment to an elderly couple of teachers, neat and quiet. Quit the library, warmly saying goodbye to colleagues who promised to visit her in Monterey. With Robert Paul's help, she filed all necessary papers for opening the cafe, found suppliers, hired an assistant. Local woman Olivia, a former elementary school teacher, retired. Setting up the house didn't take much time either. Henry James Patterson thought of everything to the details. Sarah only added a few touches: framed photos, vases with dried flowers, embroidered pillows on sofas. And of course, moved her library. Hundreds of books, collected over a long life, from worn Pushkin volumes to modern mysteries. In the cafe, she also made some changes. A small stage in the corner where local musicians played jazz and old American tunes on Friday evenings. Book exchange. A shelf where visitors could leave, read books and take something new. And of course, Grandma's menu. Dishes from recipes Sarah remembered from childhood. Cherry dumplings, pancakes with various fillings, cheese buns with cottage cheese. Business was going well. Maybe not as profitable as in big city cafes, but enough to feel satisfaction from her work. Especially pleasing were regular visitors, elderly ladies coming for morning tea, young mums with strollers stopping after walks, local intellectuals holding literary evenings in the cafe. The bell over the door tinkled. A group of tourists came in, arrived for the weekend. Sarah smiled welcomingly, taking the order. 10 years ago, working at the library, she was shy talking to strangers and now found pleasure in it. Each visitor brought their story, impressions, piece of the big world. Michael was supposed to arrive today. In 2 months, they called several times, briefly, businesslike. He told about finding new work, renting an apartment, settling child support for his son. Said he rethought a lot, learning to live independently without expecting someone to solve his problems. Sarah didn't know what to expect from this meeting. Could she ever trust him again, open her heart? Or would they remain just good acquaintances with a shared past? In any case, she was grateful to fate for these 2 months of solitude, the chance to figure herself out, understand what she really wants from life. By lunch, the cafe got crowded. Olivia barely kept up with orders, and Sarah bustled in the kitchen, preparing fresh soup portions and taking out a new batch of pies from the oven. And suddenly, over the noise of voices and clinking dishes, she heard a familiar voice. "Hello. Can I have a cup of coffee and apple pie?" Sarah peeked from the kitchen. At the table by the window sat Michael with a laptop, apparently working remotely, sometimes looking up to gaze out the window or chat with other visitors. Once Sarah noticed him talking to an elderly lady at the next table, that same Helen Mary, a former English teacher who became her first regular. Strange, Sarah thought, watching how animatedly her ex-husband conversed with the unfamiliar woman. Before, he was bored with such people, considered them uninteresting, old-fashioned, and now seemed genuinely engaged. At 6, when the last visitors left, Olivia, smiling understandingly, said, "Go, Sarah dear, I'll close myself. And tomorrow I'll come early so you don't rush. Rest, have fun. You deserve it." Sarah went upstairs, changed into a light floral print dress, combed her hair, even put on a little makeup. For the first time in a long time, strange excitement gripped her, as if she were a young girl getting ready for a first date. Nonsense. She pulled herself up, just dinner with an old acquaintance, nothing more. Michael waited for her on the promenade at the entrance to a small restaurant overlooking the ocean. The evening was warm, and they decided to sit on the open terrace. Ordered fish, a bottle of white wine, took a long time choosing dessert. "How do you like Monterey?" Sarah asked when the order formalities were done. "Amazing place," Michael responded sincerely. "Quiet, calm, but alive at the same time. And the people, they're different. Not so fixated on career and money as in the big city." "Yes, I like that too," Sarah nodded. "Here you can just live, without constant racing after something elusive." They talked about the town, the cafe, Sarah's new acquaintances. Then Michael told about his new job. He got a position as a consultant in a construction firm, dealing with restoration projects for old buildings. "Imagine, they appreciated my architecture education," he smiled, "the one I got 30 years ago and almost never used. And now it turned out in demand." "I'm happy for you," Sarah said sincerely. "You always loved architecture, just got distracted by something else." "By chasing money," Michael said directly. "You know, when I was left alone, without Dad's support, without your care, without everything I took for granted, I suddenly realized how empty I was and how much time I wasted." Sarah was silent, not knowing what to answer. It was strange to hear such revelations from a man who always thought he did everything right. "What about Jessica?" she finally asked. "And the child?" Michael darkened. "We hardly communicate. She found some businessman, moved in with him. I pay child support, sometimes see Ethan, but it's hard. She does everything to limit our contact." "I'm sorry," Sarah said quietly. "The child isn't guilty." "I know," Michael sighed, "and I try to be some kind of father. But it's difficult when the ex is like she is." After dinner, they walked long along the promenade. The October evening was surprisingly warm, the ocean calm, the sky clear with bright stars. "You know what I think about?" Michael said suddenly, stopping at the parapet. "How strangely life is arranged. I had to lose everything to start appreciating what I had." Sarah looked at his profile outlined by moonlight. Still the same Michael, and completely different. As if time erased the superficial, showy, leaving only the essence. "I don't expect you to forgive me or love me again," he continued without looking at her. "I just want you to know. I've changed and will change further. For myself, not for someone else, because I realized how wrong I was. In everything." Sarah was silent, feeling something turning in her soul. Not love. No, that feeling died 2 years ago and unlikely to revive. But perhaps the beginning of some new feeling. Respect, friendship. She didn't know yet. "Come, I'll show you the lighthouse," she said, changing the topic. "It has a stunning view of the night town." They climbed the hill where the old lighthouse stood, inactive for many years, but preserved as an architectural monument. From the observation deck, indeed, the whole Monterey opened. Lights of houses, dark ribbon of the ocean, silhouettes of hills in the distance. Beautiful, Michael exhaled. Now I understand why Dad chose this place. Here it's like time stopped. Yes, Sarah nodded, and this feeling of freedom from fuss, from expectations, from the past, he finished for her. They stood side by side but didn't touch. Between them was distance, physical and emotional. But in this distance there was no pain or resentment, only respect for each other's boundaries. Thanks for letting me come, Michael said as they descended back to the promenade. It means a lot to me. I'm glad you're here, Sarah replied, and with surprise realized she spoke sincerely. But let's not rush. Okay, just see what happens next. Of course, he nodded. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 weeks in Monterey. I want to get to know you anew, Sarah. The real you. Not the role you played all these years. The role of my wife, keeper of the home hearth, but you, the woman who created her own business, her own world. Sarah smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen not as part of something, not as a function, but as a full person with her dreams, desires, ambitions. Then till tomorrow, she asked when they reached her house. Maybe show you the town. There's an interesting fishing museum and an old church on the hill. With pleasure, Michael smiled. And thanks for everything. He didn't try to kiss or hug her, just lightly touched her arm, fleeting, almost weightless touch, and he went toward the hotel. Sarah went upstairs, changed into home clothes, and went out to the terrace. The ocean roared in the dark, stars twinkled above, and her soul was amazingly calm. Not ecstasy, not happiness, but precisely calm. Deep as the ocean, clear as the sky overhead. Maybe, she thought, this is the beginning of a new life. Not escape from the past, but its acceptance and rethinking. Not changing scenery, but changing herself from within. With this thought, she went to sleep, for the first time in a long time, feeling no anxiety or doubts about tomorrow. Whatever the future brings, she was ready to meet it with an open heart. The week flew by unnoticed. Every morning Sarah dealt with the cafe, and after lunch, handing things to Olivia, met Michael. They walked all of Monterey, cozy streets of the old town, promenade with fishing boats, old church on the hill, fishing museum with artifacts of the town's centuries-old history. Michael turned out an attentive listener and observer, noted interesting facts, photographed architectural details, asked locals about building histories. Sarah discovered with surprise that she liked his new enthusiasm. Where before he viewed historical sites through potential profit, how much a building would cost if restored and sold. Now he was interested in the history itself, the spirit of the place, the connection of times. One day they took an old bus to a neighboring village where a 19th century estate was preserved. Half ruined but still impressive, it stood on a small lake shore, surrounded by ancient trees. Imagine how much history these walls hold, Michael said thoughtfully, running his hand over the cracked plaster. People lived, loved, suffered, rejoiced. And now all that's left are these stones. And memory, Sarah added. Locals still remember legends about this place. Robert Paul told that the last owner of the estate, an old count, bequeathed all his property not to his gambler son, but to a young governess who was the only one to sincerely care for him in old age. Just like Henry James Patterson, Michael noted quietly, a shadow of guilt flashing in his eyes. History repeats, huh? Sarah was silent. What to say? Yes, the parallel is obvious, but she didn't want to stir old wounds, neither hers nor his. In the evenings, they often sat in Sarah's cafe after closing, drank tea, talked about childhood, dreams, books, movies, about everything except their former marriage and his betrayal. As if tacitly agreed not to touch that topic, let it heal before returning to it. To Sarah's surprise, she found it interesting with Michael. He had rethought much in these months, became deeper, more thoughtful, started reading. Before, he hardly touched books, considering it a waste of time. Now he got into architecture history, biographies of famous architects. Sometimes he helped in the cafe, set tables, talked to visitors, went to the market for fresh produce. Olivia at first eyed him suspiciously. Sarah told her story, and the assistant was set to protect the poor woman from this cad, but gradually thawed, especially when Michael fixed the finicky coffee machine that the local repairman couldn't handle. Midweek, an unexpected incident happened. A drunk man came into the cafe, large, red-faced. He reeked of cheap alcohol from afar. He rudely demanded something to eat, called the waitress a hick, and started harassing girls at the next table. Sarah, standing behind the counter, was at a loss. She never had to deal with such in her cozy cafe. But Michael, sitting with a book in the corner, immediately rose and confidently approached the man. "Sir, you're disturbing the visitors. I suggest you leave the establishment." "And who are you?" The man smirked insolently. "Some protector showed up. I'll get you." What exactly he planned to do to Michael remained unknown because at that moment the local cop entered the cafe, a grey-mustached man in uniform who sometimes stopped for tea. "Making trouble again, Pete?" he asked wearily. "Come on, let's step outside, get some air." Sarah exhaled with relief when the door closed behind them, and Michael approached the scared girls, apologized for the incident, and offered tea on the house. "Thanks," Sarah said quietly when he returned to the counter. "I was lost. Never faced such situations." "No problem," Michael shrugged. After all, the guy was just drunk. But good the cop showed up in time. "I'm not sure I'd handle if it came to a fight." There was no boasting or smugness in his voice, only an honest assessment of his abilities. And this honesty touched Sarah more than any showy heroism. In the evening after closing, when they sat on the terrace with tea, Michael suddenly said, "You know, I keep thinking about Dad, about how little attention I paid him. It seemed there was plenty of time, that I'd still talk, communicate. And now it's too late." Sarah set aside her cup and looked at him attentively. "I think he knew you loved him," she said softly. "Just you had different ideas of how that love should be expressed." "Maybe," Michael sighed. "But I missed so much. We could go fishing together, like in my childhood. Could discuss books. He was such an erudite. Could just be a real family, not for show." "Don't torment yourself," Sarah touched his arm. "All we can do now is learn lessons from the past and try not to repeat mistakes in the future." "You're right." He looked at her gratefully, as always. "You know, I often thought lately why I didn't listen to you before. You always gave such right advice, and I brushed it off, thought I knew life better." Sarah smiled bitterly. "I wasn't always right, Mikey, and not always genuine. Often said what you wanted to hear, not what I really thought. Afraid to argue, afraid of conflicts. Those weren't two healthy relationships, honestly." They were silent, pondering what was said. For the first time in these days, they touched the topic of their marriage, their past, and to Sarah's surprise, it didn't cause the usual pain. Only sadness and some light regret about what could have been, but didn't happen. "Maybe we should start over," Michael asked quietly, looking at the ocean. "Not as husband and wife, but as two people who once lost each other and now perhaps found again." Sarah looked at him for a long time. In the dusk, his face seemed softer, and his eyes reflected the promenade lights. "Let's not rush," she finally said. "We have time. And I want to be sure this isn't just a moment, not just nostalgia for the past." "I understand," Michael nodded, "and I'll wait as long as needed. But I want you to know, I've changed, Sarah, and these changes are real." 6 months passed since Sarah moved to Monterey. Her cafe Home Comfort became a favorite spot for locals and tourists. By spring, she expanded the menu, adding light salads and cold soups. And on the terrace appeared planters with bright flowers she grew herself. On this sunny April morning, Sarah stood on her house terrace and looked at the garden awakening after winter hibernation. Apple trees planted by Henry James Patterson were covered in tender pink buds, promising a bountiful harvest. The air was filled with freshness and the aroma of first spring flowers. In these months, much changed. The cafe turned into a real cultural center of the town. Literary evenings, baking workshops for kids, history lovers' club meetings were held here. Sarah found not just a new residence, but a true home and community of like-minded people. Michael, after that first week in Monterey, returned to the city but didn't disappear from her life. They called almost every day, sharing news and thoughts. He came twice, for New Year's and in March for her birthday. And each visit brought not tension or pain, but calm joy of meeting a person who became what? A friend? Close acquaintance? Sarah hadn't defined this status yet. During his last visit, they walked long along the ocean shore, watching the last snow melt under the spring sun. "I got a job offer in Monterey," Michael said then. "Local authorities plan to restore the historic center, looking for specialists. Robert Paul recommended me, showed my work on that old estate." "And you accepted?" Sarah asked cautiously. "Wanted to consult you first." He looked at her attentively. "Won't it be inconvenient for you if I move here? I understand you created your world, your life here, and don't want to intrude if you're not ready." Sarah thought long about her answer. Was she ready for Michael to become part of her new life? Wouldn't old grievances return? Wouldn't the old scenario repeat? "You know, I think it's a good opportunity for you," she finally said. "You love architecture. It's your calling. As for us, let's just live day by day, not rushing events. We've both changed, grown. Perhaps now we can truly get to know each other." He hugged her then, for the first time in these months. Not passionately, not demandingly, just gently pressed to himself, and she felt his heart beating. In this embrace, there was no falsity or pretense, only gratitude and quiet joy. And now, standing on the terrace and looking at the blooming garden, Sarah thought about what awaited her ahead. Michael was supposed to arrive today. For good, with things. To start work on the restoration project. He rented a small apartment downtown, insisted on it, though she offered a room in her house. "Let's not rush," he said, and she was grateful for this understanding, for respect for her personal space. Sarah went down to the cafe. Time to prepare for opening, knead dough for morning baking, brew coffee, arrange fresh flowers on tables, familiar beloved cares now forming the basis of her new life. The day flew by in chores and cares. Closer to evening, when the main flow of visitors ebbed, the cafe door opened, and on the threshold appeared Michael, with a travel bag over his shoulder and a bouquet of wildflowers in hand. "Hi," he smiled. "I'm home." Sarah came out from behind the counter and approached him. In his eyes, she saw what had been missing so long in their relationship: sincere admiration and respect. Not condescension, not possessive feelings, but precisely respect for her as a person, for her choice, for her new life. "Welcome," she said simply, taking the flowers. "How was the trip?" "Fine." He looked around. "It's so cozy here and smells so good." "Fresh cheese buns with cherry jam," Sarah smiled. "Your favorites, remember?" "I remember." His eyes warmed. "You always remembered such things, and I didn't appreciate—" "That's in the past," she said softly. "Now is different time, different us. Sit, I'll make you tea." They sat by the window, drank tea, talked about future plans, his work, her cafe, possible joint projects. Outside darkened, lanterns lit on the promenade, and some anticipation hung in the air. Not passionate love, not stormy emotions, but something deeper and real. The possibility to start over, already knowing themselves and each other truly. "You know, I often think about Henry James Patterson," Michael said suddenly, looking at the photo of her father-in-law that Sarah placed on the mantel, "about how wisely he arranged everything. As if he knew it would be exactly like this. He always saw deeper than we." Sarah nodded. "Often told me. Life isn't a straight road but a maze. Sometimes you need to hit a dead end to understand where to go next." "Wise man." Michael raised his cup as if saluting his father. "Pity I realized it too late." "Not too," Sarah smiled softly. "Just in time for a new chapter." When the cafe closed, they went up to Sarah's house terrace. The spring evening was warm, a light breeze blew from the ocean, and the air smelled of lilac from the neighbor's garden. "I'm so glad you let me back into your life," Michael said quietly, standing beside her at the railing. Even as a friend. "You know, once I thought I'd never forgive you," Sarah admitted, "that the pain and resentment would stay with me forever. But then I realized, holding on to the past means depriving yourself of the future. And I let it go. You were always stronger than me." He turned to her, wiser, deeper. "I just didn't see it. Or didn't want to because it made me smaller in my own eyes. Sarah shook her head. It's not about strength or weakness, Mikey. Just each has their path, their lessons, and we both, it seems, learned ours. They stood side by side, looking at the town lights and the dark ocean expanse in the distance, not touching but feeling some new closeness. Not physical, but spiritual, understanding, acceptance, respect. What next? Michael asked, breaking the silence. I don't know, Sarah answered honestly. Let's just live day by day, without expectations, without pressure. And maybe we'll find something new, he finished for her. Something real. She nodded and for the first time that evening took his hand herself. Just like that, without subtext or promise. And in this gesture was more sincerity than in all passionate vows of their past life. The next morning, Sarah woke with an unusual feeling of peace and lightness. Bright spring sun pierced through the curtains and birdsong came from the garden. She went to the window and saw Michael tinkering in the garden, weeding strawberry beds she planted in the fall. Sarah smiled, watching him carefully remove weeds, leaving tender strawberry shoots. Symbolic, she thought, remove the weedy, unnecessary, leaving room for new living. She went down, brewed tea, and came out to the garden with 2 cups. Decided to help. He smiled embarrassedly, taking the cup. Noticed yesterday the weeds completely choked the strawberries. Thanks. Sarah nodded, sitting beside on the bench. Kept planning with Olivia, but hands didn't reach. They drank tea, looking at the awakening garden and listening to the distant ocean roar. And at that moment, Sarah felt she had come home. Not in the sense of physical place, but in the sense of soul state, serenity, acceptance, openness to the future. Thanks, Henry James Patterson, she said mentally, looking at the sky. Did you know it would be like this? That your last will would become not just property transfer, but a new chance for both of us? It seemed a light breeze running through the garden whispered in reply, Live happily, Sarah dear. You deserved it, and she knew it would be so. Not because Michael was beside again. Perhaps their relationship would grow into something new, or maybe they'd remain just good friends. But because she finally found herself, not in reflection in others' eyes, but in her own heart, and that was the main gift Henry James Patterson left her in his last will.